Hello and welcome to the Marketing Times Analytics Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Sofronas, and today we're on with Chad Sollis. Chad, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Alex, for having me today. I'm excited to have this conversation. I have been in high-tech marketing for over 2 decades, actually marketing, product, and experience roles for companies in multiple industries in B2B SaaS, EdTech, CPG, consumer electronics, e-commerce. I have been blessed to see 4 companies through IPOs and exponential growth, seeing even one company from early $30 million stages up to a $3 billion revenue. So it's been a wild ride.
Wow, that's really interesting. So I guess the first question at a high level, what is it that makes a company or what is the defining characteristic of a company that achieves that level of growth?
Yeah, from my experience, the single most important thing is product market fit. You can have great go-to-market teams, but more than anything, I actually think that good product market fit is what ultimately helps or takes a company on that kind of exponential journey. And product market fit comes from really understanding the market, the customer, and your solution so well that you can bring those 3 things together perfectly.
So, do you have any experience with actually finding product market fit or companies that have experimented with different ways to frame their product and position and even build their product for a better product market fit?
For example, at Vivint, where one of the stops along my way, they were a company that they started with a great, we'll call it a go-to-market team. They're just very assertive with sales. They started as a door knocking company for pest control. And while that did well, they ended up pivoting to home security. And within that home security pivot, what they discovered in that process was that it wasn't about the technology, it was about the full experience. And at the time, they were just selling contracts off to other home security providers, and they realized that the experience was bad, the product was okay, and people wanted a more complete end-to-end experience where the service was good, the support was good, the install was seamless, the hardware was integrated into it. And so that's where Vivint, in its early days, they actually said, we're not going to sell these contracts anymore. We're going to build the hardware ourselves. We're going to bring all of the support in-house. We're going to hire technicians to do the install. And taking that frame of mind, that all came from listening to customers when they were interfacing with them at the beginning. They created this incredible experience that just started to outweigh the competitors. Then what they found is there was a nice bridge into home automation. From home security to home automation, the technology was similar. The people that were buying home security were also frequently buying or trying to buy home automation. And so you started seeing this great fit between the two. And home automation bridged into energy, which ultimately bridged into solar. And just listening to the customer, listening to what the market was demanding, and letting the pieces coalesce together ultimately made that company a tremendous success.
And now, a quick word from our sponsor for this episode, Adverity. Is your marketing team drowning in data? With so many platforms and sources, it can be overwhelming. If you're spending more time organizing data than analyzing it, you're not alone. But what if you had a solution that makes your marketing data work for you? Introducing Adverity, the platform that helps you build a unified and accurate data foundation. Adverity integrates and transforms all of your marketing data in one place, allowing your marketing and analytics teams to spot trends, optimize performance, and drive results faster. No more guessing and no more data chaos. Just insights that matter. Trusted by global brands like Amex, IKEA, and Red Bull, Adverity has helped businesses gain a competitive advantage and unlock their full potential. Ready to make your data extraordinary? Visit adverity.com and book your demo today. That's Adverity, ADVERITY.com, because your data deserves better. Thanks. And now back to the episode.
So, what kind of data would a company be looking at to determine the next sort of adjacent vertical to enter into?
It's a good question. More than anything, in my opinion, the core of all of this is having empathy for your customer and prospect. And so the data I would collect is actually talking to your customers. More than anything else you're doing, you talk to your customers and aggregate their information. A lot of product people they like to reference the Henry Ford, they wanted faster horses quote. And the reality is, they would have actually, a good product person listening to that feedback would translate, I want faster horses, to the combustion engine, right? And if you're listening to your customers, you'll find those tangential markets because they're going to talk about it. They're going to talk about those pain points. And generally speaking, when companies begin to scale, they don't actually need to go out and find more markets. They need to find deeper value within the existing market they're in. And that's what I saw with actually multiple businesses.
How should a business approach the decision between expanding outwards versus deeper?
There, you'll find a point of diminishing returns, and your data will represent that. And that's usually a sign that either the buyers change, the buyers' interest change, or the competitive landscape has changed. I'll just use the Vivint example again, since we already have a foundation there. What happened with Vivint is their door knocking go-to-market approach started to plateau. And so we brought in talent to create a new channel for go-to-market, which ended up being all digital with a call center and TV, direct response TV, direct response social, and created an entire digital inside sales program. That, when it started, was a fraction of the business, 1 or 2%. Today, that portion of the business is 65 or so percent. It actually has exceeded the door knocking program, even though the door knocking program is really what exploded that business. And they were able to find that new channel to go in. But automation in that circumstance, home automation, was also the opportunity to go wide. So it's just listening to customers and listening to market signals that will ultimately tell you those things. Another example was a Traeger. Traeger's a wood pellet grill company, the first and largest, and they've been doing wood pellet grills since 1987. It wasn't until a couple of years ago that they branched out into a new product, because it was very clear with the market signals that griddles were becoming rapidly popular with the same audience that liked to cook outside. And so they developed a griddle product as part of that. So it's, again, just listening to market signals, listening to customers, ultimately help you nail down that product market fit and the timing for those things.
Yeah. So when you're talking about listening to customers, have you seen successful companies have external research conducted, or do they have internal teams that are conducting that research?
It's a great question. I've seen both. I got lots of friends in these categories, but I am personally not a fan of bringing in the big consulting firms. I won't name names, but your listeners know who they are. They're generally not incentivized correctly to give you an outcome that's going to last. So I think it's good to have a third-party perspective, but I wouldn't make them the sole provider. I would have expertise and research done in-house or done by multiple third parties that could give you an objective perspective that doesn't have any kind of self-interest bias to that.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, incentives really do predict a lot. So I want to talk about the marketing side of growing businesses because I've heard different takes on how businesses approach marketing KPIs when they're growing versus when they've grown and they're looking for efficiency. So I'm just curious, for the businesses you've seen really achieve the growth that most businesses are probably looking for, how did they approach marketing? Was it a grow at all costs mentality? Was it do it in an efficient way the whole time mentality? How have you seen it differ based on, is it venture funded versus self funded? Can you talk a little bit about how you've seen the marketing budget approached by companies that grow successfully?
Yeah, you bet. Everywhere I've been, so I've been part of venture-backed businesses, private equity growth. I've had the fortunate blessing to have pretty diverse experience there. The marketing teams I've both been a part of or the teams I've run, we've always operated with unit economics that would be favorable, meaning while the rest of the company or the company at the whole may have been operating in the red, the marketing side of the equation always operated at a positive ROI. I think if you're doing things right, marketing shouldn't be the cost center that is dragging down your profitability. Even when, for example, if I go way back to the Omniture days, and Omniture was acquired by Adobe and became Adobe Analytics, we operated most of our programs for every dollar that we put into a marketing program, we would see $14 come out of it. And that was a fully burdened cost, meaning headcount, technology, and program variable dollars. We operated that. At Pluralsight, when we were growing, and at Omniture, we were growing at over 100% CAGR. At Pluralsight, a little more recently, we were venture backed, but we had bank covenants as well. So we actually had to be profitable. Our EBITDA had to be positive. And we were growing at 100% CAGR, actually like 115% CAGR. We also operated between 7 and 15% EBITDA during that time frame. I think if you bring on the right people, you focus on the right segments, you really understand your audience, you're doing a lot of effective optimization, and you become a bit maniacal about data, I think marketing teams can operate profitably and efficiently.
So you mentioned that some of the really good companies that you've seen have 10x plus multipliers on the marketing dollars that are put into them. Have you ever seen a company that has a 0.8 multiplier where you're maybe losing a little bit of revenue upfront just to acquire the customer, maybe to increase a valuation that's based on customer count?
None of the companies I have been a part of had that. Now, if you look, I guess that's not true. Omniture, I remember it pretty vividly because about 2 years into my experience there, we had a big party, AC/DC themed, back in black, which was when we had moved from the red back into positive right before our IPO. So we were operating in the negative. However, on the marketing side of the equation, we weren't. It was in other components of the go-to-market or engineering and product where we were in the negative. So as a company as a whole was in the negative, but marketing itself actually was a positive variable in that.
Okay. Yeah, that intuitively makes sense that marketing really shouldn't be run past the point of at least a net zero return. What about and maybe you weren't as close to this side, but were the companies typically spending more on the branding side for awareness, or were they focusing on converting customers and possibly customers that are considering competitors and trying to pull them away from your competitors?
Yeah, so this has been something that has shifted pretty dramatically, I would say, in the last 5 years. So I would say on the consumer side, so Vivint, Traeger, we invested pretty heavily in brand and awareness, and that served us really well. In the B2B companies like Omniture, Adobe, Pluralsight, at that time, this was beyond 7 to 10 years ago plus, We did it all with demand creation and our demand generation. Very little brand work was done. We actually called it demand to brand. Like, we actually created the brand for those companies through a lot of demand work, but everything was measured to ROI. I think in the last 5 years, because of a variety of reasons, the buyer has shifted, technology and privacy has shifted. The way buyers rely more on peer-to-peer information, more so than peer-to-company, individual to company information. And they're doing 80, 90% of their research before they even engage with the business. And today's marketer in B2B is going to honestly behave a lot more like a consumer company would have actually for most of time, is they lean into brand so that people become aware. And I think for B2B marketers, that has actually been a pretty critical shift in the last 5 years with number one, a younger demographic coming in to be the buyer, that demographic growing up or becoming very familiar with social media as part of their professional and personal life. Those things start to blend. A lack of trust with certain avenues historically, like your Gartners and Forresters and your even G2 and some of those platforms for reviews. What social media has given us and this kind of new demographic is a reliance on peer-to-peer information as well as personal research. And so branding, getting way ahead of your purchase, becomes, quite frankly, more important than your paid search and SEO and things like that. The other thing that's pretty critical is really understanding your audience, understanding the segments, understanding the people visiting your site, but also understanding the people not visiting your site and how to reach them and what topics are going to be important to them.
Yeah. I'm curious about tactics that you've seen companies that are growing engage with, because there's certain tactics like content syndication that really are a force. Like, they force contacts and leads into the system to then develop and hopefully close. But I've seen mixed reviews on the effectiveness of those contacts versus other tactics that might generate interest and then trigger hand raisers from the prospect base. And I'm just curious, like, which tactics do successful growth companies engage with, maybe particularly in the B2B space, but also in the B2C if it's different, that really produce more demand versus maybe vanity metrics?
Yeah. So you'll hear there's some pretty loud voices on LinkedIn. Some gentleman by the name of Chris Walker, he'll talk about this. The CMO at 6 Sense will talk about this. But there's what they will call, and it's not my language, but I now use it. Demand creation happens before people are actually looking for your category or your business. And then demand capture is all your traditional channels like paid search, SEO, display ads, things like that. So on the demand capture side, the tactics that I think companies are succeeding the most with is engaging in those really what I'd call beyond top of the funnel. It's you're creating a YouTube channel, doing YouTube shorts, and then you're back it out. What I'm seeing is people would do like a long form video content, like what we're doing here. They'll take that, they'll atomize it or break it into small 10 to 30-second clips, and then they distribute that all over LinkedIn. If your audience is on, they'll also break it into written content, so you'll see it on Medium or LinkedIn articles. And the goal is to actually just be everywhere. But you can't scale that super well. Not every company has a content team of 15 people that can be creating all the time, and it's pretty expensive to engage influencers to do that stuff for you. So you have to get smart with it, and you have to leverage your content more broadly. For us, for example, we're reaching out and we're doing podcasts with folks that have reach into the audience we're interested in talking to. So it's doing your own things like podcasts and getting that distributed widely through atomization and through channels where your audience is. But then it's also engaging in co-creation of content, of podcasts and other pieces with others that have reach into that audience. And so I think that companies that are winning today are the ones that actually really understand that principle. They're doing owned media, but then they're also co-creating and getting out and sharing the message broadly.
That's a topic that came up on an earlier podcast about leveraging other people in the content you create, co-hosting webinars, whatever you can do to get different people involved. Even if you're taking prospects out to dinner, having current customers there, and just getting a lot of collaboration and discussion happening between people. Maybe that has something to do with just social proof of the product, and people just trust when there's more people involved in sharing a message rather than just coming from one source.
Yeah, 100%. And people at the core, people don't trust companies. People trust people. I'll give you an interesting example from my LinkedIn profile this last couple of weeks. We had received some feedback through a channel. Hey, you got to try this certain technology. It's the best. I'm hearing nothing can touch it. It's amazing. So we're like, okay, we already have someone that does that thing. Sure, we'll look at it. We'll assess it. So I post on LinkedIn, hey, has anyone heard? Tell me what you've heard about this software. I'm really curious what your experience with it. And I have a network of people that like use this stuff every day. It was crickets. No one had heard of it, or they've heard of it, but no one had used it. Or the ones that had used it was like, man, it's a nightmare to implement. You have to hire a couple of people to manage it. Once you do that, there's some value in it, but it takes months to get there. And very different than like coming through another channel that may have not necessarily been social proof, so to speak. And so you can't believe everything coming from a company. And so people lean on their social peers and they want to hear it from customers and people that have actually experienced it and want to buy or have purchased and have had a good experience. And they want to hear it directly rather than through the company telling the story.
Along those lines, what's your opinion on review sites, G2 Crowd, Magic Quadrant? Some of these can be really expensive to buy your way into consideration, but a lot of leaders trust those independent valuations of the products and services. So do growing companies tend to engage with those, and do they invest heavily in them?
Yeah, this is one man's opinion, but over the course of my career have probably purchased, I don't know, $1 to $200 million worth of technology. Forrester and Gartner and similar have never come into my evaluation criteria, not even once. Now, some of my peers, the organizations valued and looked at those, but for me, I don't trust them because they're pay to play. If I don't pay Gartner or Forrester, I'm not going to show up in their quadrant or their wave. Or if they do show me up, I don't show up with glowing recommendation. So anything pay to play, I'm skeptical of. G2 is less pay to play. However, people that are reviewing, there's lots of programs now that are incentivizing end users with gift cards and whatnot to provide reviews. And so even those are becoming less trusted broadly in technology purchase decisions, which means, again, more than ever, it's really important to have this network of social validation where your customers will tell the story for you without it coming from you. Your customers telling your story will sell your product better than any review site, better than any analyst, because it's authentic. They paid for it, and now they They don't have to do it, and they're willing to do it. And I actually just saw a LinkedIn post 2 days ago of someone that had been assessing the traffic to G2 and some of the other kind of user review oriented sites, and their traffic's way down because of this lack of trust, in my opinion.
So you've mentioned content creation, but what kinds of content have you seen be the most effective? Is it blog posts, LinkedIn posts and from who? Like LinkedIn posts from CEOs themselves, or obviously the marketing team on their behalf, podcast interviews with the CEOs, or what kinds, or webinars maybe with clients or something? Like what kinds of content are more effective to produce?
Yeah, video by far is the most relevant, and I would say more short form than long form. People are busy. They don't generally want to sit down and spend 30, 40 minutes watching something, but if you can entice them with a 30-second or maybe even 2-minute clip, and then they might engage with your deeper long form format. But short form video, people are used to consuming. That's how social media has trained us, right? I do find that folks will engage with long form written, but again, they need a teaser to get them there. You have to have a hook and get them in, and then they'll read it. But again, I think video is better. You can visualize. You can, between creating a little bit more human connection, it can be more authentic. You could actually articulate more quickly, and people know how to consume it because of how we've been trained. As far as the subject, again, customers are going to be the best thing there. The second best is, I would say, people that are the most like the person you're trying to identify with, because people want the like me conversation. They understand me, they can empathize with me, and that is going to be the best personality to put in front of people. So if you're talking to marketers, put a marketer in front of them. If you're talking to product people, try and put a product person in front of them. If you're talking to a special audience group that's very niche, find someone that like identifies with that group. Because again, that person's it's gonna be natural to be authentic with them. And that's critical. And then B, they're going to be like, oh, that person, because of that authenticity, gets me. They understand my problem. If I'm talking to a marketer, they understand the difficulty of personalization and segmentation and the right message at the right time. They understand the privacy issues and blocking data capture, and personalization and other things. The authenticity and relevance becomes the most important. So the personalities you put out there for your content need to match the audience that you're ultimately trying to attract.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that's the CEO. Sometimes you have a really dynamic, passionate, empathetic CEO. That's your guy or girl. Or maybe it's your CMO or your CPO. Maybe it's actually a product manager, or it's your conversion optimization specialist, or it's your chief accessibility officer, depending on what topic you're trying to hit.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I like your earlier point that bringing in influencers can be really effective, but that's tough to scale because that can be quite costly at a certain point.
Yeah.
So
and I'll be honest, like in our strategy at AudioEye, right now we're experimenting with all of it. Historically, this company has been what I would call a demand capture company. We were really good at search and things that just your typical acquisition channels. We're really good at dialing those in. And we're moving, again, what I call beyond the funnel into awareness work. And so we're trying third-party podcasts. We're trying first-party podcasts. We're experimenting with bylines and first-party articles. We're doing atomization with our YouTube channel. We're doing all of it and trying to expand the awareness both for our category and our business. And we're seeing really good things from it. To put it in perspective, and I'll be somewhat high level just for competitive reasons. But if you look at something that came from demand capture with low intent, meaning someone stumbled onto us through search and came to us maybe looking for solutions to an accessibility lawsuit or something. Those low intent leads are going to convert somewhere between 1% and 2%. But when they come to us after engaging with our awareness work and they're like, hey, I'm really interested, I'm going to raise my hand, I want a demo, we convert those 1 and 2, 2 and 3, so much more that then what's hard for marketers and CEOs to get their head around, or CMOs and CEOs, is the investment in the awareness side is very difficult to measure. You actually have to roll up and like measure at a 30,000 foot view rather than this historical way we're all used to, which is like down to which keyword generated X amount of revenue. You have to actually blow it up and look at it from a marketing portfolio perspective.
Yeah. Speaking of which, what are some of the KPIs related to marketing, but also just generally customer health, maybe that successful growing companies would focus on? Yeah, just broadly. Maybe for marketing, it would be like return on marketing investment, but what else would you look at?
Yeah, a couple things for that. As far as general health, I think like one of the single best metrics a company can look at is NRR, net revenue retention. That's going to indicate, are you keeping your customers, and are those customers buying more with you over time? Because that means you're firing on all cylinders, so to speak, in my opinion. You're taking care of people, they like you, and they're like, hey, here's another area of the business that I think you could help us with. Then the second metric, as far as the growth side, there's a few economics I think are important. One is what I would call coverage is qualified pipeline that's closing in current or future quarters. And then every business is going to be different. There's going to be a calculation to get there because you're going to have some business that closes intra-quarter. You're going to have some business that crosses quarters. And so it's not a simple, like, I need 5X coverage. If 60% of your business closes intra-quarter, you might only need 2 or 3X coverage. But ultimately, coverage is your strongest indicator of hitting your current quarter from a new revenue perspective and future quarters from a new revenue perspective. Coverage also needs a balance on the cost side, because anyone can dump a ton of money in and all of a sudden grow their pipeline if they're half decent at go-to-market. And so the other unit economic would be, you could use CAC, but CAC is very difficult to measure, generally speaking, because there's so much involved with that. So if you're looking for a metric that everyone should and could have access to, a cost per qualified opportunity, which would indicate, to get your coverage, this is the cost to get that. Those two metrics combined with NRR, I think you could, and again, there's other things like close rate and ASP and other important variables. But again, if we're trying to simplify, I think you look at those couple metrics and you could build a healthy business.
How would you diagnose a business that is good at generating pipeline but bad at closing it? What would you look at first?
The first thing I would look at is people, the sellers. If you're generating pipeline, and again, for me, pipeline is qualified, which means a seller has had a meeting with them. They've done a discovery call, maybe not a demo yet, but they at least understand the person's problem, and the company is interested in continuing the dialogue. And even better qualified pipeline is if they've had a demo already. So if you're there and you're not closing, the first thing I look at is the people. The second thing I'll look at is, why are we losing these deals? Is it, again, because keeping in mind the buyer journey, 80% of that journey is happening before this stage, right? Before they're talking to us, they've already been researching. So you got into the consideration set somehow, right? So at this stage, they know that you're at least potential. So I'd say, who are we losing to competitively? So if we're losing competitively, then it becomes a training issue, because if your solution positioning on the outside, the marketing side, is getting people in the door, but how we're selling is not, I would look at enablement, training, competitive landscape. Do competitors have something that we all of a sudden don't, and that's a differentiator and we're losing people? Are we getting added to the consideration set just because they need 2 or 3 quotes, but they've already picked someone else? I would start assessing those things, but starting with the people, then the training. Generally speaking, if you're at that stage, your problem is not operational, meaning it's not your RevOps team, it's not your CRM, it's not your marketing automation. It's something with the human to human interaction. And so I assess all of those components. The other thing I will look at is speed. Are we being time sensitive with these prospects? Because if you think about it, again, 80% of their research, they're at the final mile. They want to get this done and moving on. And if you're taking 2 weeks to get them back a quote or to line up a solution engineer meeting and whatever, that's going to impact your deal, because that's going to leave an impression of, oh, this is how this company is going to operate, and I just want to get this done.
Yeah.
And so those are probably the 3 areas I would look at if you're not closing rapidly or as expected.
Right. On the topic of the sales process, how have you seen AI improve and maybe even slow down or harm the sales process? Maybe with AI agents or just some kind of integration of AI?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. There is value for AI across the board on both sides of the equation. I think there's a bit more hype than value with AI, mainly because that's where VCs are dumping their money and they want some return there. And so they flood social media with hype. That said, I think where AI agents, they hit and miss. I have seen it create value on those low intent leads, as you don't want to consume the time of a expensive seller with a lead that's at that research stage, and an AI agent can really cultivate that in a relatively meaningful way. I would say as good or maybe a tad better than historical nurture sequences. As far as writing the content and writing the sequences, I think AI can provide speed there. I think you always need a qualified individual to review it and tweak it. I would never trust anything AI written out of the box, but I do think it can help speed up processes by 40, 50, 60%, and can speed up iterating on those processes as well. The other thing I think AI can be useful is detecting behavior. Behavior is one of the most important indicators that both marketers and sellers potentially overlook. And understanding and detecting key moments in behavior or key phrases in conversations, say like with Gong, AI can really help identify those critical moments to enable a human to go do something with that prospect. So those are the areas I think AI can contribute. I just wouldn't over-index on it and put your whole strategy on AI.
What about AI SDRs specifically? What's your viewpoint on them?
I think it's worth the test. It's going to hit different for each business's audience. So it's something I would test. I would be cautious with it, but it could work for your business. I've seen it work for different businesses, and some companies are going to be better than others at that. And for your audience, it may not resonate at all. For example, if you're selling to engineers, probably not going to do well with an agent. If you're selling to salespeople or HR professionals or maybe marketers and product people, it might do okay. It's not going to be a silver bullet, but it might be a good option for your low intent leads that you wouldn't have otherwise sent to your sellers.
Why do you say engineers specifically wouldn't be a good?
Engineers generally aren't going to engage with any any content like that, whether it's from a human or from a bot. And so it's more just their personality and style, at least from my experience. I guess if you really trained it and you sent only text emails and you kept them very brief and sent them to video recording, podcast clips and things like that, maybe it could work for engineers. But just generally my experience, engineers will see through that and immediately have distrust with that business.
What's the cost of that distrust? Can you earn it back?
I think all people are reasonable. So I think, again, when a business exercises empathy, listens, and I think every personality type, every job function appreciates empathy. And if a business and a seller and a marketer engage with empathy, yeah, I think you can absolutely earn that trust back, but it will be a process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just got to think about your own experiences, right? Like when I get automated stuff, the worst is when they pretend to be a real person. I'm more okay if it's a bot and I know it's a bot. But if it's a person passing it off as a personalized message, there's something that irks you about it, like they're taking a shortcut.
It's disingenuous, right? Yeah. So, but again, companies need to scale, and it's hard to get one-to-one on everything. So it's, you're striking a balance with those things.
Yeah.
So for me, the approach is, and again, we'll test AI SDR just because it's in our DNA to test, and we'll sort it out. But my core strategy is around getting people familiar with digital accessibility before they need it, way beyond what they need. And as I move forward into other avenues in the future, that I'm going to lean into brand and awareness in that way to educate people before they're even looking for your product. So that brand, AudioEye in this case, is the company they think of when they're like, we have a lawsuit, we need to solve this. Man, we need to be compliant so we don't have a lawsuit. How do I solve this? Or, man, I want to look for opportunities to increase conversion. Who do I talk to understand my audience better? I want AudioEye to be the brand people think of.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess final question, out of curiosity, are there any companies that you see in the marketplace that you think that company's probably going to do really well and grow over the next couple of years? They just have the sort of maybe the product market fit or whatever it is that you believe will see a lot of growth?
Oh man, that's a good question. I don't have a great answer for that. I'll say AudioEye, of course, because I have to do that, and I believe in that. I think our product market fit is lining up really nicely. Market conditions are lining up really nicely. And I think one thing we believe is that there is no silver bullet to digital accessibility, but there is a gold standard, which that standard can be delivered via AudioEye. I think more interestingly than not, I do think we're going to see a lot of AI companies come and go. That I do believe that. Some of the biggest venture capitalist firms are doing massive funds almost entirely dedicated to AI. It's going to be a hyper competitive landscape. And again, no one is really tapping into creating great value from this yet. So I think you'll find a lot of those businesses come and go. I think your larger businesses leveraging AI will be the ones to either acquire the good ones or figure it out on their own and turn things into really helpful productivity tools. Productivity and speed. There's a lot of hype on LinkedIn, again, almost for every role. AI is going to replace developers. AI is going to replace marketers. I read one the other day that said AI is going to replace middle managers because it can do coaching and mentoring. And the reality is that people are missing in all this is most people like humans and want to deal with humans. They're okay with like mundane stuff happening in automation, but generally speaking, I don't want to be coached by AI. I'll go watch a video of a human doing something. I don't want AI who has no context to give me coaching. So I think it's going to help us do things better. So just today I was doing something in Zapier, and they had an AI agent that said, hey, ask us a question, we'll help you build a workflow. So I went through it, and it actually probably saved me 50% of my time. That was a great use of AI. I used ChatGPT the other day to help me write some Python. I'm one of these weird CMOs that actually love to get tactical, and my particular tactical talent happens to be on the technical and operational side. So I was having it help me write some Python. It was very useful for that. I had to tweak it and adjust it, but it gave me a baseline, probably saved me 40% of my time. So I think we're going to see tools like that really excel. I think the tools that claim to do it all for you are going to fall down. And I think the really great tools will get gobbled up by larger businesses like Salesforce, HubSpot, Microsoft, Google, and they'll become part of their productivity suites, would be my guess.
I love that. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of questions I could ask you from here that I want to, but I think we'll save it for another episode in the future. Thank you,
All right.
Chad.
You bet. Thank you.
Awesome. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you soon.